In today's explainer, we're diving into uprooting deep habits, looking at where ancient wisdom actually meets modern science. I mean, we've all been there, right? You know, that sinking, heavy frustration of just being completely stuck in modern distractions. The endless scrolling, promising yourself you're going to change, and then failing again. Well, today, we're going to break down exactly how to finally escape that cycle.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do we always relapse? It's kind of the ultimate question, isn't it? You try to quit a bad habit, you gather up all this willpower, and yet a few days later, you're pulled right back into the exact same swamp. It is exhausting. The harsh truth we found in our sources today is that, well, our own minds are actually working against us. We really like to think we're making choices freely, but in reality, our brains have become totally enslaved to these deep-seated routines.
And you know what? This whole exhausting cycle usually kicks off with a tiny, seemingly harmless excuse. Come on, we've all said it. I'll do it tomorrow. Or I'll just watch one more episode, and tomorrow I'll finally get serious about my career. It's this universal lie we tell ourselves. We genuinely think it's just a minor delay. But here's the kicker. Every single time you say tomorrow, you are actively conditioning your brain to become addicted to that exact bad habit today.
To really wrap our heads around how this conditioning works, our source material shares this incredibly powerful historical parable. So picture this. A deeply frustrated young man comes to the Buddha practically in tears because he's become a total slave to his bad habits. He knew these habits were ruining his health, his studies, literally his entire future. But every time he tried to quit, his mind just overpowered him. Now, instead of giving some long, complicated lecture, the Buddha took a really unique, silent approach. He just asked the young man to walk with him into a nearby garden.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole core of our explainer today. While they were in that garden, the Buddha pointed to a tiny, fresh little plant and asked the youth to pull it up. The boy did it effortlessly, just, with one hand. Next, the Buddha points to a medium-sized plant. The boy had to use a bit more effort this time, but he uprooted it. Finally, the Buddha points to this massive, old, deep-rooted tree and says, "Now uproot this one." Well, the young man pulled with absolutely all his might, but the tree? It didn't budge a single inch. No way! The Buddha just smiled and explained, "Your habits are exactly like these plants. When a fresh habit is new, it's small, it's easy to pull out. But as you repeat it over and over, it grows into this massive, completely unmovable tree in your life."
When we bridge this ancient wisdom with modern psychology, it gets really fascinating. We realize that the soil that tree is growing in, that's your subconscious mind. This is the deep mental space where repeated actions literally harden into permanent roots. So when you say just one more time, you aren't just making a harmless mistake. You are actively watering a deep-rooted tree in your subconscious. What started as a tiny, easily manageable action completely morphs into this unmovable fixture in your life. And that is exactly why it feels almost impossible to break free.
So the crucial point here is understanding why we keep watering that tree in the first place. Modern psychologists actually warn us about this dopamine illusion, and it perfectly validates the ancient teachings we just talked about. See, when you yield to a bad habit or some modern distraction, your brain releases dopamine. It gives you this fleeting fake peace, a hit of instant gratification. Your brain is literally getting tricked into thinking this toxic distraction is a reward, and so it just reinforces that loop over and over and over again.
But look at this stark contrast, because this is huge. First, you get that fake peace, right? That fleeting thrill that makes you feel good for like a fraction of a second. But the very moment that chemical rush fades, you immediately crash into despair, deep anxiety, and this really profound loss of self-worth. You literally start falling in your own eyes. And honestly, this was the ultimate aha moment from the research for me. The habit tricks you with temporary comfort, but then it leaves you entirely empty. It drains all your internal energy and leaves you totally poorer in spirit.
So, what does this all mean for us? How do we actually fight back? Well, we have to shift our focus from the problem to the empowering solution. As the Buddha so famously taught, conquering the mind is better than conquering all kings. Think about that for a second. If you allow selfish people, useless social media scrolling, and toxic thoughts to just occupy your mind, you are actively destroying your inner power. But if you can conquer your own mind, you become an absolutely unstoppable force.
To actually achieve this kind of mental conquest, the ancient texts offer a seriously powerful psychological tool. It's called Sakshi Bhav, or the observer technique. Now, when a craving hits, or when that late-night overthinking just starts storming in your brain, our natural instinct is usually to either fight the thoughts or just surrender and flow right along with them. But here is the secret. Fighting them actually gives them more power. It's literally like adding wood to a fire. The observer technique, on the other hand, is about simply watching your thoughts silently. No labeling them as good or bad, no fighting them, and absolutely no acting on them.
Let's visualize this together for a second. Imagine you are sitting on a high, completely silent mountain, just looking down at a river. Now, that river is your mind, and the water flowing by, that represents your thoughts, your urges, your anxieties about yesterday or tomorrow. You wouldn't jump into the river to try and stop the water, right? You just watch it flow. By acting as a silent observer, you strip those negative late-night thoughts of all their strength. You literally starve them of the oxygen they need to survive. And eventually, those intense urges, they just drift away on their own.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this mindset completely shifts how we move through life. Our sources make this brilliant comparison between a sheep and a lion. The sheep, well, it just runs with the distracted, fearful crowd, always seeking instant validation and the comfort of the herd. But the lion controls its senses. It walks alone if it has to, and it stays fiercely, independently focused on its goal. If you truly want to uproot your bad habits, you have to stop seeking the comfort of the distracted herd and adopt the fierce focus of a lion.
Which brings us to the most practical part of our explainer. How do we actually start pulling up these deep roots today? Like right now? How do we stop giving in to those cheap dopamine hits and finally reclaim our mental energy? Well, the sources provide a highly actionable sequence of behavioral changes. These are steps you can implement immediately to start breaking these deep habits once and for all.
Let's move to the next part and see how this builds a complete behavioral overhaul, starting with mastering your mornings. Step 1 is waking up early, ideally during what ancient texts call Brahma Muhurta, which is around 3 to 5 a.m. This is when the world is completely silent and your mind is at its most receptive. Second, you have to aggressively kill that tomorrow excuse. Just do not let it take root. Third, cultivate a purpose so incredibly consuming that your mind literally has no room left for toxic habits. Fourth, use that observer technique we just discussed to breathe and simply watch your urges fade away. And finally, ignore the mockers. Let your silence and your ultimate success be your only response to anyone who doubts you. Because waking up early gives you the immense power to conquer your own mind long before the world even has a chance to distract you.
Ultimately, breaking deep habits isn't about waiting for some magic moment of motivation to strike. It's about recognizing that every single day you delay, those roots are digging deeper and deeper into your subconscious. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Stop living in tomorrow. Your roots are growing today. Will you let them grow into an unmovable tree of regret, or will you uproot them right now and plant the seeds of your own mastery?